7 weeks ago, I woke up from a 10-hour heart transplant with my chest sawed open. But the real pain was my mother's voicemail. She casually mentioned they had sold my apartment to fund my sister's perfect wedding while I was comatose. $425,000 stolen with a forged signature. Lying there, I made exactly one phone call to ensure their big day became a total nightmare. Want to see a golden child lose everything? Stick around. My name is Arlene Whitcomb, and the first thing I realized when I opened my eyes was not that I was alive, but that I was incredibly thirsty. The second thing I realized was the pain. It was a dense, heavy presence sitting on my chest, as if an elephant had decided to take a nap right on top of my sternum. That made sense. Of course, to replace a failing valve in a human heart, surgeons have to break you open. They saw through the bone, spread the rib cage apart with metal retractors, and expose the most vital engine of your existence to the cold air of the operating room. I had been under for 10 hours. My body felt like it had been dismantled and put back together by a mechanic who had left a few wrenches inside. I was in the intensive care unit at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. The room was dim, lit only by the glowing monitors that stood sentinel around my bed. Beep, beep, beep. The rhythm was steady, artificial, but steady. A machine was breathing for me, or at least helping me breathe. Until the nurse came in and removed the tube. That part is a blur of choking and gagging, followed by the sweet, sharp rush of oxygen through a nasal cannula. I drifted in and out of consciousness for what might have been hours. Every time I woke, I expected to see someone, my mother, Elaine, holding my hand, my father, Robert, reading a newspaper in the corner chair. Maybe even Clarissa, my younger sister, looking up from her phone for 5 seconds to ask how I was doing. But there was no one. Just the nurses, efficient and faceless in their blue scrubs, checking my vitals and adjusting the IV drips that snaked into my arms like clear plastic vines. "You're doing great," Arlene, a nurse with kind eyes, whispered to me during one of my lucid moments. "Your new valve is working perfectly." I tried to nod, but my neck felt like it was made of rusted iron. I wanted to ask where my family was, but my throat was too dry, scratchy like sandpaper. Eventually, the nurse left, and I was alone again with the beeping. My phone was sitting on the bedside table. It looked alien, a black rectangle from another life. My hand trembled violently as I reached for it. The tremors were a side effect of the anesthesia and the trauma my body had just endured. It took me 3 tries just to grip the device. When I finally brought it to my face and tapped the screen, the blue light assaulted my eyes. 50 missed calls. A surge of warmth flooded my chest. Momentarily dulling the pain of the incision, they had been worried. 50 calls. They must have been frantic, trying to get updates, maybe getting lost in the hospital parking garage. I unlocked the phone, my thumb slipping twice on the passcode. I went to the call log. My stomach dropped. The warmth turned to ice. The calls were not from my family. They were from unknown numbers, real estate agents, a title company, and my building's management office. Interspersed among them were 3 calls from my mother. Just 3. And 1 voicemail. I navigated to the voicemail tab. The message was 2 minutes long. It had been left yesterday, while I was undoubtedly lying on the operating table with my chest cavity gaping open. I pressed play and held the phone to my ear, pressing it hard against my head, as if to block out the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. "Arlene, honey, it is Mom." Elaine's voice floated through the speaker. She sounded breezy, light. It was the tone she used when she was ordering a salad at lunch or discussing the weather. It was not the tone of a mother whose daughter was undergoing open-heart surgery. "I know you are probably groggy right now," she continued, "but Dad and I had to make an executive decision. We are at the bank right now. Listen, things have gotten a little tight with Clarissa's wedding coming up so fast. You know how she is. She wants the grand ballroom, the imported peonies, the whole fairy tale. And honestly, she deserves it. She has had such a hard year." I stared at the ceiling tiles. A hard year? Clarissa had spent the last year vacationing in Bali and finding herself on my parents' dime. Anyway, my mother's voice chirped on. We needed liquidity. Immediate liquidity. We used that power of attorney you signed back when you went to Europe 3 years ago. I know. It was just for emergencies. But this is a family emergency. We sold the condo. The wire transfer just went through. $425,000. It is a godsend. Really. We paid the venue deposit and the caterer, and we have enough left over to cover the honeymoon suite. The room seemed to tilt sideways. I stopped breathing. The heart monitor sped up. Beep, 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 beep. Don't worry about the details, she added, her voice dismissive. You are in the hospital. You don't need the stress. We signed everything for you, since you will be recovering for a while. You can just come stay at the house in Lake Forest when you get out. It makes more sense anyway. You don't need that bachelor pad anymore. Okay. Call me when you wake up. Love you. The message ended. I lay there, frozen. The phone slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the plastic tray table. They sold my apartment. They sold my home. I tried to process the words, but they wouldn't fit together in a way that made sense. The condo in the Loop was not just an asset, it was my sanctuary. I had bought it 5 years ago. Right after I made director of design at Helix Horizon Group, it was a small penthouse, just 1,200 square feet, but I had gutted it and redesigned every inch myself. I knew every grain of the white oak flooring. I had handpicked the slab of quartzite for the kitchen island. I had designed the lighting system to mimic the natural circadian rhythm of the sun. That apartment was the physical manifestation of 10 years of 80-hour work weeks. It was the only place in the world where I felt safe, and they had sold it for $425,000. $425,000. The number echoed in my head. That was my life savings. That was my equity. That was my freedom. Gone. Transferred in a blink of an eye to pay for Clarissa's fairy tale. Panic. Cold and sharp. Seized me. I grabbed the phone again. I dialed my mother. It rang, and rang, and rang. Voicemail. I dialed my father. Voicemail. I dialed Clarissa. It rang 4 times, and then she declined the call. A second later, a generic text message appeared on my screen. Can't talk right now. At the tasting for the cake. OMG. Wait until you see the fondant design. Rest up, sis. She was eating cake. I was lying in a hospital bed with a zipper of staples running down my chest, homeless and destitute, and she was eating cake. A guttural sound escaped my throat. It was half sob, half scream, but it was strangled by the pain in my sternum. I couldn't breathe. The edges of my vision started to blur. Easy, Miss Whitcomb, easy. A nurse rushed in, alerted by the spike in my heart rate monitor. You need to stay calm. Your blood pressure is spiking. My phone, I gasped, clutching it like a lifeline. I need. You need to rest, the nurse said firmly, checking the IV line. Do you want me to call your family? No! The word ripped out of me, harsh and guttural. No, do not call them. The nurse looked surprised, but she stepped back. Okay, just breathe. I closed my eyes and forced myself to inhale, in through the nose, out through the mouth. I had to think. I was an architect. I solved problems for a living. I dealt with structural failures and load-bearing crises. This was just another crisis, a massive, catastrophic, life-altering crisis. I did not call the police. That would have been the logical reaction for a normal person. But I knew my family. If I called the police now, my mother would spin it. She would cry to the officers, tell them I was delirious from the medication, claim it was all a misunderstanding, a family arrangement. She was a master manipulator. She would make me look like the ungrateful, confused daughter attacking her loving parents. No, I needed armor. I needed a weapon. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name. Mr. Vance. Harrison Vance was my personal attorney. I had retained him years ago when I started doing freelance consulting on the side. He was expensive, ruthless, and he hated nonsense. I pressed the call button. It was 7 in the evening. He wouldn't be in the office, but he always answered his cell for me. Arlene? His voice was rough, surprised. I thought you were in surgery today. Is everything all right? Mr. Vance, I croaked. My voice sounded like crushed gravel. I need you to check something for me, right now. You should be resting. Arlene, can this wait until tomorrow? No, I said. Please, log into the county recorder's database, or check the MLS, my apartment, Unit 42B. Check if there has been a transfer of title recorded in the last 24 hours. There was a pause on the other end. I could hear the rustling of fabric, the sound of a chair shifting, and then the distinct clack, clack, clack of typing on a keyboard. Arlene, what is going on? He asked, his tone shifting from concerned friend to alert attorney. Just check, I whispered. The silence that followed lasted for an eternity. I stared at the sterile white ceiling tiles, counting the little perforations. 100, 200. My God, Vance said softly. The air left my lungs. It is showing as pending closing, Vance said, his voice tight. The deed was uploaded electronically this morning. Seller, Arlene Whitcomb. Buyer, an LLC based in Delaware. Sale price, $425,000. Cash deal, fast close. I didn't sign it, I said. Tears finally pricked my eyes, hot and stinging, but I refused to let them fall. I was under anesthesia. Vance, I was on a bypass machine. I see the closing documents here, Vance continued. He was reading fast now. Signed by Robert Whitcomb, acting as power of attorney. Notarized by Jeremy Miller. Uncle Jerry, I said bitterly. My dad's drinking buddy. This is fraud. Arlene, Vance said. His voice was hard now. Cold steel. This is grand larceny. Straight up. That power of attorney you gave them years ago? It was specific, wasn't it? Limited scope? It was for medical decisions only while I was in Europe, I said. And it expired 2 years ago. Then Jeremy Miller notarized an expired or forged document, Vance concluded. Arlene, listen to me carefully. I can have the police at your parents' house in an hour. I can freeze that transaction. We can file an emergency injunction. I opened my mouth to say yes. I wanted to see the flashing lights in the driveway of the Lake Forest house. I wanted to see my father being handcuffed while my mother shrieked in embarrassment. I wanted to see Clarissa's face when her wedding budget evaporated into thin air. But then, I stopped. If I stopped the transaction now, the money would be returned. The house would be mine again. My parents would claim it was a mistake, an administrative error. They would play the victim. Clarissa would cry about her ruined wedding, and I would be the villain who sent her own father to jail over a misunderstanding. The family narrative would remain the same. Arlene is difficult. Arlene is selfish. Arlene doesn't care about family. I didn't just want my money back. I wanted justice. And justice, in my family, required total, undeniable destruction. I needed them to commit fully. I needed them to spend the money. I needed them to stand on that stage at the wedding, basking in the glory of a theft they thought they had gotten away with. Arlene, Vance asked, are you there? Do you want me to call the precinct? I took a deep breath. The pain in my chest flared, a sharp reminder that my heart was new, fragile, and currently beating in a cage of betrayal. No, I said. My voice was no longer trembling. It was steady, terrifyingly steady. No? Vance sounded incredulous. Arlene, that is nearly $500,000. Let the sale go through, I said. Let the money hit their account. Let them spend it. Arlene, this is risky. Once that money is gone, I know what I'm doing, I interrupted. They think I'm asleep. They think I am the dutiful daughter who will wake up, get angry, and then eventually roll over and take it because family comes first. They are counting on my guilt. They are counting on my silence. I looked out the window of the ICU room. The city of Chicago was a grid of lights in the distance. Somewhere out there was my apartment, empty now, stripped of my presence. Mr. Vance, I said, I want you to get copies of everything. the forged power of attorney, the bank transfer records, the notary log from Jeremy Miller. I want a paper trail so thick it could choke a horse, but do not file anything yet. Do not contact them. What are you planning? Vance asked. Clarissa's wedding is in 20 days, I said. I am going to attend. You will be barely out of recovery, Vance warned. I will be there, I said. And I am going to bring a gift. I hung up the phone. The room was silent again, save for the machines. I lay back against the pillows. The physical pain was still there, throbbing in time with my pulse, but the emotional shock had transmuted into something else. It had hardened. I didn't feel like crying anymore. I didn't feel like the victim. I felt cold, a deep, Arctic cold that spread from my new heart out to my fingertips. My mother had said in her voicemail that the money was for a perfect wedding. She wanted a show. She wanted a spectacle. I closed my eyes and let the ghost of a smile touch my lips. Okay, Mom, I whispered into the empty room. You want a show? I will give you a show. I decided then and there I would play the part. I would be the recovering invalid. I would let them think they had won. I would let them spend every single cent of that $425,000. And then, when the lights were brightest, when the room was fullest, when they felt safest, I would burn their world to the ground. To understand how two parents could justify selling their eldest daughter's home while she lay unconscious on an operating table. You have to understand the mythology of Clarissa. My sister is 29 years old. She is objectively beautiful, possessing the kind of glossy, high-maintenance appearance that requires a team of estheticians and a small fortune to maintain. For the last 7 years, Clarissa has listed her occupation as content creator or brand ambassador. In reality, she is a professional failure. She tried to launch a sustainable swimwear line, but she got bored when she realized she actually had to source fabrics and manage shipping logistics. That venture cost my father $50,000. Then there was the travel blog era, where she insisted she needed to stay in 5-star resorts to build her audience. That lasted 6 months and cost another $30,000 before she decided living out of a suitcase was too exhausting. I, on the other hand, was the backup plan. I was the sturdy, reliable machinery that kept the family reputation humming in the background while Clarissa performed center stage. I paid my own way through architecture school at the Illinois Institute of Technology, working night shifts as a bartender while my classmates slept. When I landed the job at Helix Horizon Group, I did not celebrate with a vacation. I worked 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, clawing my way up from junior drafter to design director. The dynamic was established before I could even tie my own shoes. In the Whitcomb household, resources were finite, and gravity always pulled them toward Clarissa. I remember when I was 17 and Clarissa was 13, I had saved up for 2 summers to buy a used Honda Civic, the day I brought it home. My father took the keys. He said Clarissa needed it for ballet practice because the bus was too dangerous for a girl with her potential. I walked to school for the next year. When Clarissa turned 16, they bought her a brand new convertible because, as my mother put it, she had a fragile spirit and needed encouragement. "You are strong, Arlene," my mother would always say, usually right after taking something from me. "You can handle it. Clarissa is sensitive. She needs help." That word, help, was the heaviest word in the English language. It was a weapon they used to bludgeon me into submission. My heart condition was the ultimate test of this dynamic. I had known about the defect for years. My mitral valve was deteriorating, a ticking time bomb in my chest. I kept it a secret. I knew that if I told them, the narrative would not be about my survival. It would be about the inconvenience of my illness. They would worry about the cost of the surgery, the time I would take off work, and the burden it would place on the family mood. 3 weeks before the surgery, I finally had to tell them. The doctors had given me an ultimatum: operate or die. We were at dinner at a steakhouse in the city. Clarissa was talking about the floral arrangements for the wedding, debating between white hydrangeas and imported orchids. "I need open-heart surgery," I said. I dropped the sentence into the middle of the conversation like a stone into a pond. Silence followed. My father chewed his steak. Clarissa looked at her phone. My mother sighed. It was a long, beleaguered sigh, the kind one might make when a waiter brings the wrong order. "Now?" she asked. She did not ask if I was scared. She did not ask what the survival rate was. She asked about the timing. "I do not have a choice." "Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady. "The valve is failing. The surgery is scheduled for the 30th. "But that is 3 weeks before the wedding," my mother snapped, her voice rising in pitch. "Clarissa is stressed out of her mind with the final fittings. She needs her sister, Arlene. She needs support. Can you not push it back a month?" "If I push it back a month, I might be dead," I said. "Don't be dramatic," Clarissa chimed in, rolling her eyes. "You look fine. You are just doing this for attention because everyone is focusing on me right now." I looked at them. I looked at the 3 people who were supposed to be my biological safety net. At that moment, the air in the restaurant felt very thin. "I am having the surgery," I said. "I just thought you should know." "Fine," my father grunted. "Just do not expect us to be at the hospital 24/7. We have vendors to meet. This wedding is a logistical nightmare." The wedding. The coronation of Clarissa. This brings us to Julian. Julian is the son of a family that owns a massive chain of boutique hotels across the Midwest. He is 32, handsome in a bland, corporate way, and obsessed with reputation. He loves Clarissa, or at least he loves the version of Clarissa my parents have presented to him. The cultured, philanthropic daughter of a successful Lake Forest family. He does not know that my parents are broke. He does not know that the investments my father talks about at the country club are non-existent. He does not know that 5 years ago, my parents leveraged everything they owned to buy Bitcoin at its peak because Clarissa told them it was the future, only to panic and sell at the bottom, wiping out their retirement and the equity in their home. For Clarissa, this wedding is not just a marriage. It is a rescue mission. She needs to marry Julian to secure her future. She needs to wash away the failures of her 20s with a ceremony that screams old money and high society. She demanded a wedding that would cost $500,000. My parents, desperate to keep up the charade and lock in this wealthy son-in-law, agreed to everything: the $50,000 dress, the live orchestra, the 6-course meal for 300 guests. But they had no money. They were drowning in debt, maxing out credit cards to pay the interest on other credit cards. That is where I came in. Or rather, that is where my apartment came in. I bought the penthouse in the Loop 5 years ago. I remember the day I closed on the property. It was the proudest day of my life. I had invited my parents over to see the empty space before the renovations began. My father walked around the living room, looking out at the skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He did not say congratulations. "You know," he said, hands in his pockets, "this is a lot of space for one person. It is selfish. Really. It is an investment." "Dad," I said. "Clarissa is trying to get her sunglasses brand off the ground," he said, turning to look at me with cold eyes. "She needs capital. If you have enough money to buy a place like this, you have enough to help your sister. Family helps family. Arlene, you are hoarding success." I did not give them the money then. I drew a boundary. I thought that was the end of it, but I was wrong. To them, my success was an insult. My solvent bank account was a personal attack on their financial incompetence. They looked at my apartment and saw a savings account they simply hadn't accessed yet. When I went under anesthesia, I became vulnerable. I became absent. And in the twisted logic of Robert and Elaine Whitcomb, my incapacitation was their opportunity. They did not see themselves as thieves. I know exactly how the conversation went. My father probably poured a drink and said, "Arlene is not using the apartment right now. She is in the hospital. By the time she recovers, Clarissa will be married to a billionaire. We can pay Arlene back later. She won't even miss it." They convinced themselves that selling my home was a strategic reallocation of family assets. They viewed my property as a communal resource, one that I was selfishly guarding while my sister had a real need, The $500,000 wedding was the priority. My life, my shelter, my 10 years of hard labor were just collateral. Lying in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, the realization washed over me with the clarity of a cold shower. I was not their daughter. I never had been. To Robert and Elaine, I was a financial instrument. I was a bond that had finally matured. I was an emergency fund they could raid when their golden child needed a new coat of paint. They thought they had just solved their cash flow problem. They thought they had pulled off the perfect crime because they believed the lie they had told themselves for decades. Arlene is the strong one. Arlene will understand. Arlene will forgive. They forgot one thing. Financial instruments do not have feelings. They do not have loyalty. But they do have terms and conditions. And when you violate the contract of a financial instrument, the penalties are usually catastrophic. My sister wanted a wedding that cost $500,000. She wanted a day that everyone would remember forever. I closed my eyes and let the rhythm of my new heart lull me into a light sleep. I was going to make sure she got exactly what she wanted. Everyone was going to remember that day. I would make certain of it. The digital glow of my iPad screen was the only source of light in my hospital room as the clock ticked past 3 in the morning. My chest still throbbed with a dull, persistent ache, a constant reminder of the physical trauma I had endured, but my mind was operating with the cold precision of a diamond cutter. I was not sleeping. I was not crying over the loss of my penthouse in the Loop. I was reviewing a PDF document that was 140 pages long. My parents thought they were masterminds. They believed that by forging my signature and selling my apartment for $425,000, they had executed a brilliant financial maneuver to save their reputation. They thought they had sacrificed a pawn to save the king and queen. What they did not know was that the king and queen had been checkmated 5 years ago. They just had not realized the game was over. To understand the magnitude of their mistake, you have to go back to the winter of 2021. That was the year Clarissa, fresh off a breakup with a minor league baseball player, decided she was an expert in cryptocurrency. She convinced my parents that traditional stocks were for dinosaurs. She told them that the real money was in a series of obscure digital coins that were supposedly going to the moon. My father, Robert, has always been a man who mistakes confidence for competence. He listened to my sister. He liquidated his 401k. He took out a second mortgage on the family estate in Lake Forest. He poured every liquid asset the family had into a digital wallet that Clarissa managed. For 3 months, they were paper millionaires. They bought new cars. They renovated the pool house. They bragged at the country club about their foresight. Then, the crash happened. It was not a slow decline. It was a free fall. Within 48 hours, the portfolio lost 90% of its value. By the end of the week, it was worthless. My parents were not just broke. They were insolvent. They stopped paying the mortgage. They stopped paying property taxes. They buried their heads in the sand, hoping that if they ignored the notices from the bank, the problem would disappear. It did not disappear. The foreclosure notice arrived on a Tuesday in November. I remember the date because it was the same day I received my bonus for leading the design on the Hudson Spire project in New York. It was the largest commission of my career. I drove out to Lake Forest that night. The house was dark. My mother was weeping in the solarium. My father was drinking scotch in the library, staring at a letter from the bank that stated the property would be auctioned off by the sheriff in 30 days. "We will lose our standing," my father had whispered, his voice trembling with a fear I had never heard before. "If the club finds out we were foreclosed on, we are finished. The shame will kill us." They were not worried about being homeless. They were worried about the shame. They were worried about the optics. I sat there, listening to them panic, and I made a decision. I did not do it out of love. Though perhaps I told myself that at the time, I did it because I needed control. I needed to ensure that their chaos did not spill over into my professional life. I went to Harrison Vance the next morning. "I want to buy the debt," I told him. "You want to pay off their mortgage?" Vance had asked, raising an eyebrow. "No," I said. "I do not want to give them money. I want to buy the house, but they cannot know it is me. We set up a limited liability company in Delaware. We named it Veritas Holdings. It sounded corporate, anonymous, and vaguely threatening, like a shell company for a hedge fund or a private equity firm. Through Vance, Veritas Holdings approached the bank and purchased the distressed note before it went to auction. I paid off the arrears and took the title. I owned the house. I owned the land. I owned the pool house where Clarissa threw her parties and the library where my father drank his scotch. Then, Vance approached my parents as the representative of this anonymous investment group. He told them that Veritas Holdings specialized in acquiring high-value properties in prestige neighborhoods and leasing them back to the original owners to maintain property values. They want to keep the neighborhood stable. Vance had lied smoothly. They are willing to let you stay as tenants. The rent will be nominal, $2,000 a month, but you have to sign a strict lease agreement. My parents signed it without reading the fine print. They were so relieved, so desperate to keep their facade intact, that they didn't ask questions. In fact, they spun it into a victory for the last 5 years. I have listened to my father tell people at dinner parties, "We have a special arrangement with a private equity firm. They recognized the historical value of the estate and begged us to stay on as caretakers of the legacy. It is really a testament to the Whitcomb name." He was bragging about being a tenant in a house owned by his daughter. I scrolled down the PDF on my iPad to page 42. This was the weapon I had been keeping in my back pocket for half a decade. It was the nuclear option I had hoped I would never have to use. Clause 12. Termination for cause. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was crystal clear. The landlord reserves the right to terminate this lease agreement immediately, without notice, and initiate eviction proceedings if the tenant, or any member of the tenant's household, engages in any illegal activity, including but not limited to fraud, theft, forgery, or any act classified as a felony under state or federal law. I zoomed in on the paragraph. My parents had just committed fraud. They had forged a power of attorney. They had stolen $425,000. That was a felony. By stealing my apartment to pay for Clarissa's wedding. They had violated the one clause that protected their housing. The irony was so sharp it almost tasted metallic. They had sold the home I owned openly to save their reputation, unaware that they were about to lose the home I owned secretly. I checked the dates on the lease. The current term was set to expire on February 7th. That was exactly 1 week after Clarissa's wedding. The renewal was automatic unless the landlord, me, gave notice of non-renewal or termination. They felt safe. They thought they had pulled off the heist of the century. They were probably sleeping soundly in their 4-poster beds in Lake Forest right now, dreaming of the society wedding that would cement their status as local royalty. I tapped the screen and opened my email. I started typing a message to Vance. My fingers flew across the glass keyboard. Subject: Execution of Clause 12. Veritas Holdings. Versus Robert and Elaine Whitcomb Harrison. I have reviewed the files. Please proceed with the following immediately. First, I want a forensic handwriting expert to certify that the signature on the power of attorney used to sell my Chicago condo is a forgery. Do not file the police report yet. Just get the affidavit. I want undeniable proof that a crime was committed. Second, draft a notice to quit and a termination of lease for the Lake Forest property based on Clause 12. Cite the forgery and the theft of funds as the criminal activity triggering the eviction. Third, prepare the sheriff's eviction order. I want this ready to be served. Do not send these documents to them yet. Hold them in escrow. I will give the signal for service. The signal will be given on the wedding day. Arlene. I hit send. The email whooshed away, carrying with it the destruction of the Whitcomb family legacy. I set the iPad down on the tray table. The room felt different now. The sterile smell of antiseptic and floor wax seemed less oppressive. I was no longer just a patient recovering from heart surgery. I was the CEO of Veritas Holdings. I was the landlord. I thought about the timeline. The wedding was in 20 days. That gave me 3 weeks to recover. 3 weeks to get my strength back. 3 weeks to learn how to walk without wincing, how to stand tall in heels, how to put on a face of polite, submissive acceptance. I would have to play the role of the victim a little longer. I would have to let them believe they had gotten away with it. I needed them to feel invincible. I needed Clarissa to walk down that aisle feeling like a princess, surrounded by flowers bought with my money, wearing a dress paid for with my sweat, because the higher they climbed, the harder the fall would be. I looked at the heart monitor next to my bed. My pulse was steady, 70 beats per minute. Strong, rhythmic. My old heart had been weak. It had struggled to pump blood, struggled to keep up with the demands of my life. But this new heart was a machine. It beat with a powerful, relentless cadence. It was a heart built for revenge. I imagined the moment of the reveal. I imagined standing at the reception, the microphone in my hand, looking out at the sea of tuxedos and gowns. I imagined the look on my father's face when he realized that the anonymous investor he had been trying to impress for 5 years was the daughter he had dismissed as selfish. They had taken my sanctuary in the city. Fine, I would take their fortress in the suburbs. They wanted to talk about property? Let us talk about property. They wanted to talk about ownership? Let us talk about ownership. I closed my eyes, and for the first time since I woke up from surgery, I slept without dreaming. I didn't need dreams anymore. My reality was about to become far more interesting. It was day 3 post-operation when my father finally decided to make an appearance. I had been moved out of the ICU and into a private room. Though private was a generous term for a space dominated by monitors and the smell of industrial disinfectant, I was sitting up, slightly, propped by 3 pillows, trying to negotiate a spoonful of red Jell-O when the door swung open. Robert Whitcomb stood there. He was wearing his country club attire, pressed khakis, a navy blazer with gold buttons, and a loafer that cost more than my first car. He looked out of place against the sterile linoleum, like a peacock wandering into a slaughterhouse. In his hand, he held a basket wrapped in crinkly yellow cellophane. "Arlene," he said, offering a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You look rested." I looked at him. I had a 6-inch incision running down my sternum. I had tubes draining fluid from my chest cavity. I had not washed my hair in 4 days. Rested was not the word. "Hello, Dad," I rasped. My voice was still weak, which played perfectly into the strategy I had been refining for the last 48 hours. He set the basket on the rolling tray table. Up close, I could see it for what it was. The bananas were spotted with brown bruises. The apples had that waxy, dull sheen of fruit that had been sitting on a shelf for too long. It was a gas station gift basket. He hadn't even gone to a grocery store. He had probably grabbed it at the hospital gift shop or a convenience store on the way over. An afterthought, purchased between filling up his gas tank and checking his stocks. "Your mother wanted to come," he lied, pulling the plastic visitor chair closer to the bed. The legs screeched against the floor. "But the wedding prep is insane. You know how it is. Clarissa is having a meltdown about the napkin folds." "Napkin folds?" I repeated. "It is a big deal, Arlene," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "The aesthetic has to be cohesive." He sat down and sighed, acting as if he were the one who had just undergone major surgery. He looked at me, then looked away, his eyes darting around the room before settling on the window blinds. This was Robert's tell. Whenever he was about to sell a lie or justify a failure, he couldn't maintain eye contact. "We need to talk about the apartment," he said. He didn't say your apartment. He just said the apartment, stripping it of possession, making it an abstract object. "You mean the apartment you sold while I was in a coma?" I asked. I kept my tone soft, fragile. I needed him to think I was broken. "Sold is a harsh word," he said, chuckling nervously. "Think of it as liquidated. For the greater good. We just borrowed the equity. Arlene, that is all. Once Clarissa is settled, once the wedding is over and Julian is officially part of the family, we will make it right. We will pay you back. With interest. You forged my signature, Dad. I said. I let my head loll back against the pillow, closing my eyes halfway. Mr. Vance called me. He saw the documents. Robert stiffened. Vance is an alarmist. Look, Arlene, we were in a bind. The venue demanded the final installment or they were going to cancel the booking. Can you imagine the humiliation? If the invitations had gone out and we lost the venue, it would have destroyed us. We had to act fast. And you were indisposed. So you signed my name, I whispered. I signed it as your father, he said, his voice taking on a righteous edge. I made an executive decision. You are sitting here in a hospital bed. You are not going to be living in that high-rise for months anyway. You need care. You need to be home with us in Lake Forest. We did you a favor. Really. We took a liability off your hands so you can focus on healing. I watched him. It was fascinating, in a morbid way, to see how his mind worked. He had rewritten reality so completely that he actually believed he was the hero of this story. He wasn't a thief stealing from his sick daughter. He was a patriarch managing family assets in a time of crisis. My hand was under the sheet, resting on my phone. I had started the voice memo app the moment he walked in. The red waveform was bouncing silently, capturing every word. Dad, I said, pitching my voice to sound tremulous and scared. Do you know that forging a signature on a real estate deed is a federal crime? It is wire fraud. It is a felony. Robert scoffed. He actually rolled his eyes. Oh, stop it. Don't be dramatic. Who is going to charge me? You? We are family. Arlene, families don't sue each other. We do what is necessary to survive. You are not going to send your own father to prison over a condo. He was banking on my guilt. He was banking on the decades of conditioning that taught me to put the family image above my own well-being. I let my voice trail off, adding a small cough for effect. I worked so hard for that place. It was $425,000. Dad. And it is going to a good cause, he insisted. Clarissa is marrying a Rockefeller. Essentially, Julian's family owns half the hospitality industry in the Midwest. This wedding is an investment. Once they are married, our financial troubles are over. Julian will take care of us. He will take care of you, too. You won't need that little job of yours anymore. He didn't know I made more money than he ever did. He didn't know I was the landlord of the house he slept in. Suddenly, a high-pitched trill cut through the air. It was my father's phone. He pulled it out and looked at the screen. It is your sister, he said, beaming. She wants to say hi. He didn't ask if I wanted to talk. He just swiped the screen and shoved the phone in my face. Clarissa's face filled the display. She was in a car. The interior leather creamy and pristine. The sunlight was hitting her hair perfectly, making her look like a haloed angel. Daddy, did you tell her? She squealed. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask how are you feeling. She didn't ask is the pain bad. I am with her now, Robert said, angling the phone so I was in the frame. Say hi to your sister, Clarissa. Oh my God, Arlene, you look so pale, Clarissa said, wrinkling her nose. Are they feeding you? You look like a ghost. Hi, Clarissa, I said. Okay, forget that. Look at this. She shoved her left hand toward the camera lens. A diamond the size of a grape sat on her finger, glittering violently. Julian just upgraded the setting. It is 3.5 carats now. Can you believe it? It is heavy. My wrist literally hurts. It is beautiful, I said. And guess what? She continued, breathless. We just finalized the menu, lobster bisque and filet mignon for everyone. No chicken option. Julian's mom said chicken is for peasants. It is going to be insane. Arlene, the flowers alone are costing $60,000. I did the math in my head. $60,000. That was the down payment I had made on my apartment 5 years ago. My hard work was being turned into flowers that would die in 12 hours. That sounds expensive, I ventured. Quality costs money, Clarissa snapped, her smile faltering for a second. That is why we needed the cash. Arlene, you get it, right? I mean, Julian thinks we are paying for half of this. If he knew we were actually broke, he would freak out. His mom is obsessed with equal standing. If they knew we couldn't even afford the appetizers, the wedding would be off. I would be humiliated. You don't want that, do you? My heart skipped a beat, not from the surgery, but from the adrenaline of the admission. Julian doesn't know? I asked, keeping my voice full of innocent concern. He thinks Mom and Dad are paying for it? Duh, Clarissa said, rolling her eyes. He thinks Daddy is a genius investor. That is why we need to keep up appearances. So, thank you for the condo money. It literally saved my life. I will let you borrow the Birkin bag I'm getting as a wedding gift. Deal? I looked at my father. He was nodding along, proud of his daughter's pragmatism. Neither of them realized what they had just done. They had just handed me the keys to their destruction. Clarissa had confirmed the fraud. She had confirmed the motive. And most importantly, she had confirmed the leverage. Julian was marrying her under false pretenses. He thought he was merging with a wealthy, respectable family. He didn't know he was marrying into a den of thieves and bankrupt liars. I had it all on the recording. I needed to end the interaction before I started laughing. The absurdity of it was overwhelming. They were so confident, so dismissive of me as a threat. Clarissa, I said, forcing a weak smile. I understand. I do. Good, she said, checking her reflection in the phone camera. I have to go. My lash appointment is in 10 minutes. Love you. Bye. The screen went black. Robert pocketed the phone. See? He said, patting my hand. His palm was clammy. She is happy. That is what matters. We are building a future here. Arlene, he stood up, smoothing his blazer. He clearly wanted to leave. The hospital smell was bothering him, and he had done his duty. He had delivered the fruit. He had justified the theft. He had gotten the implicit permission he came for. Dad, I said. He paused at the door. Yes? I will be there, I said. Where? The wedding, I said. I will be there. I know I'm supposed to be recovering, but I want to come. I want to see Clarissa happy. Robert's face relaxed completely. The tension he had been carrying in his shoulders evaporated. He smiled, a genuine, relieved smile. He thought he had won. He thought I was capitulating. He thought I was the same doormat I had been for 33 years. That is my girl, he said. That is the spirit. You just focus on getting better. We will get you a wheelchair for the ceremony. You can sit in the back so you don't have to stand. Yes, I said. I would love to sit in the back. I want to see everything. I will tell your mother, he said. She will be so relieved. We were worried you might make a scene. But I knew you were reasonable. I am very reasonable, I said. Great. I will leave the fruit. Try the pears. They look decent. He walked out the door. I waited until his footsteps faded down the hallway. I waited until the silence of the room returned, heavy and thick. Then, I reached under the sheet and stopped the recording. Saved. 14 minutes. 32 seconds. I picked up the gift basket. I pulled out one of the bruised bananas. It was mushy to the touch. I looked at the trash can next to my bed. I dropped the entire basket into the bin. The heavy thud it made was satisfying. They thought I was reasonable. They thought I was safe. They thought family was a magic word that erased felonies. I lay back and stared at the ceiling. The pain in my chest was still there. But it was different now. It wasn't just pain. It was fuel. Reasonable, I whispered to the empty room. I was not going to be reasonable. I was going to be biblical. I picked up my iPad and opened the email draft to Mr. Vance. I added an attachment, the audio file I had just recorded. Then I typed one more line. Make sure the process server for the eviction notice is wearing a suit. It is a black tie event. I hit send. The hunt was on. And the prey had no idea they were already in the cage. I was discharged from Northwestern Memorial exactly 14 days before the wedding. Normally, a patient recovering from open-heart surgery goes home. but I didn't have a home anymore. My parents had sold it. And I certainly wasn't going to the Lake Forest house to be nursed by the people who had robbed me. So, I checked into a short-term corporate rental in River North. It was a soulless, beige box of an apartment with uncomfortable furniture and a view of a brick wall. It was a far cry from my penthouse, but it had one advantage. It was quiet, and I needed quiet to plan a war. The silence didn't last long. 3 days after I settled in, my phone lit up. It was a group chat notification, then another, then a flood. It started with a request from Clarissa. She didn't call. She sent an invoice. Subject: wedding extras. Urgent. Hey sis, hope you are feeling better. So, we had a little hiccup with the budget. The orchestra costs way more than we thought. Union fees. Ugh. And I decided we absolutely need the imported tulips from Holland because the local ones look sad. It is only an extra $12,000. Since you are not using your apartment money right now, can you wire this directly to the vendor? Dad said you would cover it. Thanks, X. OXO. I stared at the screen. They had already taken $425,000. Now they wanted another $12,000. It was like feeding a shark. The more blood you gave, the more it wanted. I replied with 2 words. No. Sorry. I put the phone down and went to make tea. My hands were steady. My heart rate was normal. I felt a strange, detached calm. 10 minutes later, the digital assault began. Clarissa, realizing her personal ATM had finally shut down, took her grievance to the court of public opinion. She posted a story on Instagram. It was technically set to close friends, but Clarissa's definition of a close friend included 300 people, half of whom were gossips who lived for drama. The screenshot was sent to me by a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. The image was a black screen with white text, the universal signal for an influencer tantrum. It read, "It is so sad when family chooses money over love." Imagine having a sister who is sitting on a pile of cash but refuses to help make your one special day perfect. Some people are just cold. I guess success makes you heartless. Family drama, broken-hearted wedding stress. It was a masterclass in manipulation. She didn't name me, but everyone knew who she was talking about. She painted herself as the victim of a miserly, wealthy sibling. She omitted the part where she had already stolen $500,000 from me. The flying monkeys arrived on schedule. My Aunt Linda, a woman who had never remembered my birthday in 33 years, sent me a Facebook message. Arlene, I saw Clarissa's post. I am disappointed. You have done so well for yourself. Why are you being so stingy? It is her wedding day. You can't take it with you. You know. My cousin Mike texted, "Wow. Ice Queen strikes again. Let the girl have her flowers." Even my mother's friends, women who had known me since I was in diapers, started leaving passive-aggressive comments on my old photos. Beautiful picture. Too bad inner beauty is what counts. Then came the call from my mother. "Arlene," she sobbed into the phone. She wasn't actually crying. It was that breathless, shaky voice she used to guilt-trip waitresses. "What are you doing? Clarissa is upstairs in tears. She says you are ruining everything." "I am recovering from heart surgery." "Mom," I said, sitting on the beige sofa in my rental. "I am not an ATM." "But $12,000 is nothing to you," she wailed. "You have a good job. You have savings. Why are you doing this? Do you want Julian to think we are cheap? Do you want him to think his sister-in-law doesn't support the marriage?" "I think Julian has other things to worry about," I said. "This is about jealousy, isn't it?" she hissed, her tone turning from sad to vicious in a nanosecond. "You are jealous because Clarissa found a high-value man, and you are still single. That is it, isn't it? You want to sabotage her happiness because you are miserable." The accusation hung in the air. It was so petty, so predictable, and so wrong. I wasn't jealous. I was tired. I was tired of being the villain in their delusional narrative. "Think what you want." "Mom," I said, "I am not paying for the flowers." "You are a cruel girl," she spat. "Cruel and selfish, just like your father says." She hung up. I did not post a rebuttal. I did not go on Facebook and write a long, emotional status explaining that they had stolen my home. I did not screenshot the bank transfers and post them to Instagram. I stayed silent. In the age of social media, silence is often interpreted as guilt. Let them think I was guilty. Let them think I was the stingy, bitter spinster sister. The more they vilified me, the sweeter the vindication would be. I put on my coat. I had a meeting. Harrison Vance's office was in the Loop, not far from where my apartment used to be. I took an Uber, careful not to look up at the skyline. I didn't want to see the building I no longer owned. Vance was waiting for me in his conference room. He looked tired. The table was covered in paperwork. "You look better," he said, though his eyes told me I still looked like a walking corpse. "I feel focused," I said, sitting down. "Do we have it?" Vance slid a manila envelope across the polished mahogany table. "The eviction order. Signed by a judge this morning. It is ready to be served." I opened the envelope. The document was beautiful in its brutality. Notice of termination of tenancy. Reason: breach of contract. Criminal activity. "And the handwriting analysis?" I asked. "Confirmed," Vance said, tapping a second file. "We have a sworn affidavit from a forensic document examiner. He states with 100% certainty that the signature on the power of attorney is a forgery. He even identified the pen pressure as matching your father's writing style." "Perfect," I said. "Arlene," Vance said, leaning forward, "you know what happens when we serve this, right? It is not just an eviction, it is a nuclear bomb. Your parents will be homeless. Your father will likely face criminal charges once we file the police report. Your sister's marriage will probably implode." "I know," I said. "Are you sure you want to do this at the wedding?" he asked. "We could do it tomorrow. We could do it quietly." "They didn't do it quietly," I said. "They humiliated me. They stole my life while I was helpless. They are rallying the entire family to bully me online right now. They want a public spectacle? I will give them one." Vance sighed, but he nodded. He was a lawyer. He understood revenge, even if he preferred settlements. "There is one more thing," I said. "The private investigator I hired, did he find anything on Julian?" "Julian is clean," Vance said. "Squeaky clean. He is actually a decent guy. He runs the nonprofit arm of his family's hotel business. He volunteers. He seems to genuinely love your sister." "That is unfortunate for him," I said. "But what about the prenup?" Vance smiled. It was a shark's smile. He pulled a third document from his briefcase. I managed to get a look at a draft copy through a contact at Julian's firm. It is standard for a family of that wealth, but there is a morality clause. I picked up the paper. Clause 7.4, nullification of benefits. If either party, or their immediate family members, are found to have engaged in felony criminal activity, fraud, or significant financial misrepresentation prior to or during the marriage, the innocent party reserves the right to annul the marriage immediately and all financial obligations, including alimony and division of assets, shall be void. Significant financial misrepresentation, I read aloud. Like pretending you are a wealthy socialite when your parents are actually bankrupt tenants living in a foreclosure rental, Vance suggested. And selling a condo you don't own to pay for a wedding you can't afford, I added. Exactly, Vance said. If Julian finds out about the fraud, he can walk away without paying Clarissa a dime, no alimony, no settlement, nothing. I sat back in the leather chair. The pieces were all there. My parents had built a castle on a foundation of lies. They had stolen my bricks to reinforce their walls, but they had forgotten that I owned the ground they were building on. 1 week, I said. Tell the process server to be at the reception venue at 8 o'clock, right after the speeches. It will be a bloodbath, Vance warned. No, I said, standing up and buttoning my coat. It will be an accounting. I left the office and walked out into the cold Chicago wind. My phone buzzed again. Another message from a cousin, calling me a disgrace. I smiled. They had no idea. They were throwing stones at a tank, and in 7 days, I was going to fire the main cannon. The rehearsal dinner was held at the Drake Hotel, in a private dining room that overlooked the churning, gray expanse of Lake Michigan. It was a venue that smelled of old money, mahogany, and potpourri. My parents had chosen it because it was the kind of place where Chicago's elite had been dining since the 1920s. They wanted to signal to Julian's family that the Whitcombs were of the same pedigree, cut from the same historical cloth. I arrived 15 minutes late. This was calculated. I wanted the room to be full when I entered. I wanted them to see me. I was wearing a floor-length gown of midnight blue silk, high-necked and long-sleeved to hide the angry red scar that ran down the center of my chest. In my right hand, I gripped a cane. It was not a medical supply aluminum stick, but a sleek black lacquered rod with a silver handle that I had ordered online 2 days ago. I did not technically need it to walk anymore, but I needed it for the theater of the moment. It was a visual reminder of my fragility. It was a prop that screamed, "Look at what I survived." When I stepped into the room, the hum of conversation faltered for a fraction of a second. My mother, Elaine, was standing near the bar holding a glass of champagne. Her eyes widened when she saw me, flashing with a mixture of annoyance and panic. She had probably hoped I would stay in my rental apartment, nursing my grudge in private. I walked forward. The cane tapped rhythmically against the parquet floor. Click, step, click, step. "Arlene!" It was Julian. The groom rushed over to me, bypassing his own groomsmen. He looked genuinely relieved to see me. He was wearing a bespoke charcoal suit, and his face was flushed with the excitement of the weekend. "I am so glad you came," he said, reaching out as if to hug me, then hesitating when he remembered my surgery. He settled for gently touching my shoulder. "How are you feeling? Clarissa said you were still bedridden." "I am recovering." "Julian," I said, offering him a soft, tired smile. "But I would not miss this. It is a big weekend." "It means a lot to us," he said earnestly. "I know things have been tense with the planning, but having you here makes the family complete." I looked at him. He had kind eyes. He was a good man who had the misfortune of falling in love with a mirage. He thought he was marrying into a stable, loving family. He had no idea that the check for the venue he was standing in had been written with stolen funds. He had no idea that his future in-laws were currently committing real estate fraud. "You look handsome, Julian," I said. "You deserve a memorable wedding." "Thank you, Arlene," he beamed. "Go sit down. We saved you a spot." I made my way to the tables. The room was arranged with a large U-shaped table for the wedding party and immediate family, and several round tables for the extended relatives and out-of-town guests. I looked for my name card at the head table, next to my parents or my sister. It was not there. I scanned the room. Finally, I found it. Table 9. It was in the far back corner, near the swinging kitchen doors. I was seated next to Great-Aunt Muriel, who was 92 and deaf, and a cousin from Wisconsin, whom I had not seen since he was 12. My parents had put me in the cheap seats. They had banished the financier of the feast to the kids' table. I sat down slowly, leaning my cane against the chair. A waiter appeared instantly to pour wine. I covered the glass with my hand. "Water," I said. "Sparkling?" From my vantage point, I had a perfect view of the performance. My father was holding court near the center of the room, laughing loudly at a joke made by Julian's father, Mr. Sterling. The Sterlings were intimidating people. They carried themselves with the quiet, effortless confidence of people who own skyscrapers. My father, by comparison, looked frantic. He was trying too hard. He was laughing too loud. He was drinking too fast. Dinner was served. It was a lavish 5-course affair starting with lobster bisque and ending with filet mignon. I looked at the menu card. The calligraphy was embossed in gold leaf. $400 a plate. I estimated. I ate nothing. I just watched. When the coffee was served, the speeches began. Julian's father went first. He was brief, gracious, and welcomed Clarissa to the family with a warmth that made my stomach turn. He spoke of mergers and partnerships, treating the marriage like a successful business acquisition. Then, it was my father's turn. Robert stood up. He buttoned his blazer, a nervous tic I had known all my life. He tapped his glass with a spoon. The room went silent. "Good evening, everyone," Robert began, his voice booming a little too theatrically. "When I look at my little girl, Clarissa, I see perfection. I see a young woman who knows what she wants and goes after it. Clarissa, seated at the center of the head table, dabbed at her dry eyes with a napkin. She was wearing a white cocktail dress that probably cost $3,000. Raising 2 daughters is not easy," Robert continued, chuckling. "But Elaine and I have always believed in one thing. Family supports family. We give everything we have to ensure our children's happiness. This wedding, this beautiful night, is a testament to that sacrifice. We wanted to give Clarissa the fairy tale she deserves, no matter the cost." He paused for applause. The room clapped politely. Julian's parents nodded approvingly, thinking Robert was referring to his own hard-earned money. "So," Robert raised his glass high, "to Clarissa and Julian, may your life be as beautiful as this evening." He sat down. He had not mentioned my name. He had talked about sacrifice and cost and family support, but he had erased the person who actually paid the bill. He had taken my $425,000, my life savings, my home, and he had claimed it as his own paternal benevolence. I felt a cold fire ignite in my chest. It was not anger anymore. It was hatred, pure, distilled hatred. The speeches ended, and the guests began to mingle. The room filled with the clinking of glasses and the soft murmur of jazz from the live band. I remained in my corner, sipping my water. Then, a shadow fell over my table. I looked up. It was Clarissa. She held a glass of champagne in one hand and was using the other to smooth her hair. She did not look happy. She looked annoyed. "You are depressing people," she said. It was not a greeting. It was an order. "Hello to you too, Clarissa," I said. "Why are you sitting back here like a gargoyle?" she hissed, leaning down so only I could hear. "Mom says you are making the relatives uncomfortable. You are just staring at everyone." "I am observing," I said. "It is a lovely party. It is perfect," she corrected me. "Or it would be, if you weren't sitting here with that martyr look on your face. The cane? Really? Arlene, you walked in here fine. You are just doing it for sympathy." "I had my chest sawed open 7 weeks ago. Clarissa," I said calmly. "Whatever," she snapped. "Look, just try to smile. Julian's parents are watching. They think we are a happy, close-knit family. Don't ruin the illusion." She took a sip of her champagne, her eyes narrowing. "And honestly, you should be happy. You should be honored. Your money didn't just disappear. It created this, look around. The flowers, the food, the music. You made this happen. Isn't that enough for you?" I looked at her. I looked at the sister I had protected, the sister I had bailed out, the sister who had never worked a hard day in her life. She truly believed that. She believed that my purpose in life was to be the fuel for her fire. She believed that I should be grateful for the privilege of being burned to keep her warm. "You are right," I said softly. Clarissa blinked, surprised by my agreement. "I am?" "Yes," I said. "I should be part of this. In fact, I have a surprise for you." Clarissa's face lit up instantly. The greed was reflexive, like a dog hearing a treat bag open. "A surprise? What is it? Did you bring a check? Or is it jewelry? Mom said you might have some of Grandma's diamonds." I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled all night. "It is better than diamonds. Clarissa, I have prepared a wedding gift that you will never forget. It is something unique. Something that reveals the truth of how much I love this family." "Oh, tell me," she squealed, clutching my arm. "Give it to me now." "No," I said, pulling my arm away gently. "Tomorrow, at the reception, after the speeches, I want everyone to see it." "You are the best," she said, her voice dripping with fake affection. "I knew you would come around. I knew you weren't really mad." She patted my cheek, a patronizing, condescending tap, and then swirled away. Back to the head table, back to the light, back to the lie. I watched her go. Enjoy it. I thought, enjoy the champagne, enjoy the delusion. It is the last night of your life. I turned my attention to the other side of the room. My parents had cornered Julian's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling. I could tell by my father's body language that he was in full salesman mode. He was gesturing expansively. I picked up my cane and stood up. I needed to hear this. I moved slowly across the room, navigating between the tables, keeping to the shadows. I stopped behind a large decorative pillar, just a few feet away from where they were standing. "We love the area," Mrs. Sterling was saying. She was a woman draped in pearls that probably cost more than my annual salary. "But the city is getting so crowded. We prefer the quiet of the estate." "Oh, absolutely," my mother chimed in, her voice high and breathless. "That is why we never sold the Lake Forest house. You know, we have had offers, developers offering millions, but Robert said no. He said, 'Elaine, this is a legacy property. This is where our grandchildren will play. It is important to hold on to land.'" "Mr." Sterling agreed, nodding. "Real estate is the only real wealth." "Exactly," Robert said, puffing out his chest. "We have renovated the East Wing recently. The architecture is timeless. We are actually thinking of adding a guest cottage next year. You two must come over for a summer barbecue. The grounds are spectacular in July." I gripped the handle of my cane so hard my knuckles turned white. They were inviting the Sterlings to a house they did not own. They were bragging about renovations I had paid for. They were planning guest cottages on land that belonged to Veritas Holdings. They were not just lying about the past. They were selling a fraudulent future. They were using my property as collateral to buy social standing with a billionaire family. "We would love that," Mrs. Sterling said politely. "It is so refreshing to meet a family with such a solid foundation. So many people these days are over-leveraged, flashy but empty. It is nice to know Clarissa comes from stability." "Stability is our middle name," Robert laughed. I felt bile rise in my throat. Stability. They were 2 weeks away from being homeless. They were standing on a trapdoor, and I was holding the lever. I had heard enough. I turned away and began the long walk to the exit. I did not say goodbye to anyone. I did not wave to Julian. I simply walked. Click, step, click, step. The valet brought my rental car around. It was a modest sedan, nothing like the luxury SUVs lining the driveway. I got in and sat in the dark for a moment, watching the warm glow of the restaurant windows. Inside, they were toasting. Inside, they were celebrating the union of two great dynasties. I pulled out my phone. The screen was bright in the darkness of the car. I opened my text thread with Harrison Vance. I typed slowly, ensuring every word was correct. Proceed with Plan B. 0 hour is tomorrow. Ensure the process server has the microphone feed cut before he approaches the stage. I want the visual, but I will do the talking. I hit send. Then I put the car in gear and drove away from the lake. The city skyline rose up before me, glittering and sharp. Tomorrow, I would reclaim my name. Tomorrow, the solid foundation my father bragged about would crumble into dust. I turned on the radio. A pop song was playing, something upbeat and mindless about falling in love. I turned it off. I preferred the sound of the engine. It sounded like a machine that was working exactly as designed. I was ready. The venue was the Palmer House Hilton, a cathedral of gold leaf and French frescoes that had stood in the heart of Chicago for over a century. It was the kind of place that whispered of old empires and crushing wealth. My parents had chosen it not because they could afford it, but because it was the ultimate mask. The lobby ceiling, painted with Grecian myths, loomed high above us, a fitting canopy for the myth my family was about to perform. I arrived 20 minutes before the ceremony began. I had traded the hospital gown and the recovery sweats for armor. My dress was a deep, midnight navy blue, made of heavy silk that draped like liquid steel. It was not a color of celebration, nor was it a color of mourning. It was the color of a judge's robe. It was the color of a storm bruise, high-necked to conceal the healing scar on my chest. It fell to the floor in a column of dark authority. On my arm was Harrison Vance. He was not there as my attorney today. To the casual observer, he was merely a dashing, silver-haired date in a tuxedo that cost more than my sister's first car. But I could feel the tension in his arm as I held it. Inside his inner jacket pocket, resting against his heart, was a folded sheaf of papers that weighed less than a pound, but carried the force of a wrecking ball. "Are you ready?" Vance asked quietly as we stepped out of the elevator onto the ballroom floor. "I have been ready for 5 years," I replied. The air smelled of expensive perfume and frantic desperation. Thousands of white tulips, the ones I had refused to pay for, but which my parents had inevitably charged to a credit card that would never be paid off, lined the aisle. They stood tall and rigid, like soldiers. We took our seats, not in the back this time, but in the second row, directly behind my parents. This was protocol. As the sister of the bride, I had to be visible, but not central. I sat down, arranging the skirt of my dress, and placed my black cane across my lap like a scepter. The music began. It was not a recording, it was a live string quartet, playing a hauntingly beautiful rendition of a Debussy piece. Then, the doors opened. The congregation stood. I stood with them, leaning heavily on my cane, not because of pain, but to remind them of my frailty. Clarissa entered. I had to admit, she was breathtaking. She was wearing a custom gown that was a cloud of chantilly lace and hand-beaded silk. It had a cathedral-length train that required 2 children to carry. She looked like a princess. She looked like an angel. She looked like $30,000. That was all I could see, as she floated down the aisle, beaming at the sea of faces. I did not see a bride. I saw the wire transfer from my bank account. I saw the equity of my penthouse in the loop, stitched into every seam of that dress. I saw the quartzite countertops I would never cook on again. I saw the white oak floors I would never walk on. Her veil was woven from my retirement fund. Her bouquet was wrapped in my stolen security. She reached the altar where Julian was waiting. Julian. Poor Julian. He looked at her with such raw, unguarded adoration that I felt a physical pang in my chest. It was the only moment of hesitation I had felt all day. He was a good man. He was honest. He was entering into a contract with a fraud, thinking he was marrying a peer. My father, Robert, stepped forward to give her away. He kissed Clarissa on the cheek and shook Julian's hand firmly. He looked the part of the benevolent patriarch perfectly. He patted Julian on the shoulder, a gesture that said, "Welcome to the family. Son," it was a lie. The pat was actually saying, "Thank you for saving us." The ceremony was a blur of traditional vows. For richer, for poorer. I watched my mother dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. She was crying real tears, but I knew they were not tears of joy. They were tears of relief. She was crying because she thought they had made it across the finish line. She thought the check had cleared. She thought the trap had snapped shut around the sterling fortune without anyone noticing the bait. "I do," Clarissa said, her voice clear and bell-like. "I do," Julian said, his voice thick with emotion. "I pronounce you husband and wife." The room erupted in applause. My parents turned to the crowd, beaming. My father pumped his fist in the air slightly. A victory lap. They walked back up the aisle, passing me. My mother caught my eye and blew me a kiss. It was a gesture of truce. "See," her eyes said, "it was worth it. We won." I did not smile back. I simply stared at her, my face a mask of porcelain calm. The transition to the reception was a seamless flow of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. The guests moved into the grand ballroom, a space so large it had its own weather system. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling. Casting a golden glow over the 300 guests, I sat at the head table this time, on the far end, next to the best man. He was a college friend of Julian's, a venture capitalist who spent 20 minutes trying to explain blockchain to me. I nodded politely, sipping my water. While my eyes tracked the room, I saw the process server enter. He was dressed in a black suit, indistinguishable from the hotel security or the event staff. He stood quietly by the main double doors, his hands clasped in front of him. He caught my eye. I gave a barely perceptible nod. He waited. Dinner was served. The lobster bisque, the filet mignon. But the air was thick with anticipation for the speeches. This was the moment my family lived for. This was the moment they could publicly rewrite their history. The master of ceremonies, a man with a radio voice and a shiny tuxedo, took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention," he boomed. "We have a few words from the family." My father went first. Of course, he gave a variation of the speech from the rehearsal dinner, but polished, grander. He spoke of legacy. He spoke of the Whitcomb name standing the test of time. Then, my mother took the microphone. Elaine Whitcomb was a performer. She stood center stage, clutching the mic with both hands, looking out at the wealthy, influential crowd with wide, glistening eyes. "When Robert and I started our family," she began, her voice trembling just the right amount, "we made a pact. We decided that we would give our daughters everything. We would sacrifice our own comforts, our own desires, to ensure that Arlene and Clarissa had the foundation they needed to fly." I felt Vance shift in his seat next to me. He knew the truth. He knew they hadn't sacrificed anything. He knew they had cannibalized their children to feed their own vanity. "It wasn't always easy," Elaine continued, a brave smile touching her lips. "We scrimped, we saved, we went without, so that Clarissa could have the best schools, the best opportunities, and today seeing her here, in this beautiful room, surrounded by love, I know that every penny was worth it. We gave her the world because she is our world." The room broke into applause. People were dabbing their eyes. It was a beautiful story. The self-sacrificing parents, the noble struggle. It was a complete fabrication. "And we are so generous," Elaine added, improvising now, high on the adoration of the crowd. "We are just so happy to welcome Julian. We want you to know that the Whitcomb home is always open to you. What is ours is yours." What is ours is yours. The irony was so sharp it could cut glass. They were offering him a home they didn't own. They were offering him resources they had stolen from me. Elaine handed the microphone back to the MC, basking in the applause. She sat down next to my father, who squeezed her hand. They looked invincible. "Thank you, Mrs. Whitcomb," the MC said. "Touching words, truly, and now, I would like to invite the sister of the bride, the maid of honor in spirit, Ms. Arlene Whitcomb, to say a few words." The spotlight swung across the room. It hit me. The beam was blindingly bright, hot against my face. The room went silent. I stood up. I took my cane. I looked at my parents. My father was staring at me. His eyes were wide, hard, and warning. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of his head. "Keep it short," his eyes screamed. "Don't you dare ruin this. Play the game." Clarissa was looking at me too, with a smug, expectant smile. She was waiting for the surprise I had promised her. She was waiting for me to publicly absolve her, to validate her theft with a sisterly blessing. I began the walk to the stage. The ballroom was vast, and the walk was long. The only sound was the click thud of my cane hitting the hardwood dance floor. I moved slowly. I let them wait. I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable, until the guests shifted in their seats, wondering why the sister of the bride looked like she was marching to a funeral. I reached the stairs. Vance was there to offer a hand, but I waved him off. I climbed the 3 steps alone. I stood at the podium. I adjusted the microphone stand. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the Sterlings, looking polite and attentive. I saw the cousins who had called me stingy on Facebook. I saw the friends who had liked Clarissa's victim-playing posts, and I saw my parents, sitting front and center, their smiles fixed and frozen, terror beginning to leak into their eyes as they realized I was not holding a piece of paper. I had no prepared speech. I gripped the sides of the podium. My new heart beat against my ribs, strong, steady, relentless. It was a war drum. "Good evening," I said. My voice was low, but it carried to the back of the room without a tremor. "My mother just spoke about sacrifice," I continued. "She spoke about truth. She spoke about the foundation of a family." I paused. I looked directly at Julian. He smiled at me, encouragingly. "Honesty," I said, savoring the word. "It is a rare currency these days. We live in a world of filters and facades. We curate our lives to look perfect. We hide the cracks. We paint over the rot." I turned my gaze to Clarissa. Her smile was faltering, her brow furrowed. "But a marriage," I said, turning back to the groom. "A marriage is a legal contract. It is a binding agreement based on full disclosure. It is a promise that who you are marrying is who they say they are. It is a promise that the history you are merging with is real." The room was deadly quiet now. The clinking of silverware had stopped. The waiters had frozen in the shadows. "I love my sister," I lied. "And because I love her, and because I respect Julian and his family, I cannot stand here tonight and offer a toast that is built on silence. I cannot offer a blessing that is wrapped in deception." My father started to stand up. "Arlene," he said, his voice a low, warning growl that the microphone picked up. "Sit down, Dad," I said. I didn't shout. I didn't have to. The command cracked like a whip across the room. He froze. The shock of my defiance paralyzed him. "Honeymoon phases end," I said to the crowd. "Flowers die. The music stops. And when the party is over, all you have left is the truth." I reached into the bodice of my dress and pulled out a small, sleek black remote control. It was connected to the projector system that had been set up to show a slideshow of Clarissa's childhood photos later in the evening. I had bribed the AV technician $500 an hour ago to swap the input source. "I promised my sister a gift," I said. "A gift that would make this night unforgettable. A gift of absolute clarity." I looked at my mother. She was pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. She knew, somewhere, deep down, she knew the bill had come due. "Today is a day of truth and love," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that echoed like thunder. "But love cannot exist without truth." I pressed the button on the remote. Behind me, the massive projection screen that spanned 20 feet descended from the ceiling. The lights in the ballroom dimmed automatically. The stage was set. The players were in position. "Let me tell you a story," I said, "about a $425,000 wedding present." The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was the kind of vacuum that precedes an explosion, heavy and suffocating. 300 pairs of eyes were fixed on the screen behind me, which currently displayed a stark, black-and-white document. "My gift to you, Clarissa, and to you, Julian," I said, my voice cutting through the stillness like a scalpel, "is freedom. Freedom from lies." I pointed to the screen. "This is a power of attorney document," I explained. "It is dated 7 weeks ago. It authorized the sale of my penthouse in the Loop for $425,000. It bears my signature." A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. Why was I showing them legal paperwork? "The problem," I continued, "is that on the date this document was signed, I was unconscious on an operating table at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, having my heart cut open." The ripple turned into a gasp. I saw Julian's mother, Mrs. Sterling, put a hand to her throat. "My parents," I said, gesturing to Robert and Elaine, who were now staring at me with the frozen horror of deer in headlights, "forged my signature. They sold my home while I was in a coma, and they used every single cent of that money to pay for this." I swept my arm across the room, encompassing the chandeliers, the flowers, the champagne. This fairy tale? I said, my voice dripping with disdain. It is stolen property. You are all drinking champagne bought with the proceeds of a felony. That is a lie. The scream came from my father. Robert Whitcomb launched himself out of his chair. His face was a mask of purple rage. She is delirious. It is the medication. Turn that off. Turn it off now. He charged toward the stage. His fists clenched. He looked ready to physically tackle me. But before he could reach the stairs, a figure stepped out from the shadows. Harrison Vance, my attorney, tall and imposing, blocked my father's path with the calm authority of a man who deals with much more dangerous people than suburban fraudsters. Sit down, Robert, Vance said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Unless you want the police officers waiting in the lobby to come in here right now. My father stopped dead. He looked at Vance, then back at the crowd. He realized, too late, that he was trapped. I didn't flinch. I pressed the remote again. The slide changed. Now, it showed a split screen. On the left was the forged signature. On the right was the affidavit from the forensic handwriting expert. Certified forgery, I read aloud. Confirmed by a court-approved expert. This is grand larceny. This is wire fraud. This is 30 years in federal prison. I looked down at my mother. Elaine was gripping the tablecloth so hard, her knuckles were white. She was shaking her head mutely, mouthing the word no over and over again. But that is not the only secret, is it, Mom? I asked. I clicked the remote again. A new document appeared, a deed, and a foreclosure notice from 5 years ago. You have all heard my parents brag about their estate in Lake Forest, I said, addressing the room. You have heard them tell the Sterlings about their legacy and their solid foundation. You have heard them talk about the investment group that begs them to stay in the house. I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. There is no investment group, I said. My parents went bankrupt 5 years ago. They lost everything in a cryptocurrency scam that my sister convinced them to join. The bank foreclosed on the house. They were days away from being kicked out onto the street. I paused. I wanted this to sink in. I saw Mr. Sterling lean forward, his face hardening into stone. I bought the house, I said. Me? Through a shell company called Veritas Holdings. I bought the debt. I paid off the arrears. And I let them stay there as tenants for a nominal rent, to save their pride, to save their precious reputation. I turned to my parents. I am your landlord, I said. And I have been for 5 years. The shock in the room was palpable. It was a physical wave. My father stumbled back as if he had been punched. My mother let out a strangled sob. The lie they had lived for half a decade, the lie that defined their social existence, had just been vaporized. And here's the kicker, I said, clicking the remote one last time. The screen displayed a magnified section of a lease agreement, Clause 12. This is our rental contract, I said. Clause 12 states that if the tenants commit a felony, the lease is terminated immediately. By forging my signature and stealing my money, you triggered this clause. I reached into my purse, which I had brought to the podium, and pulled out a thick envelope. I held it up. This is your eviction notice, I said. You have 24 hours to vacate my property. You are homeless, effective immediately. My mother collapsed. She didn't faint. She just slid out of her chair and onto the floor, wailing. It was a raw, ugly sound. No, you can't. We are your parents. Arlene, please. My father stood there, swaying. He looked suddenly old. The bluster was gone. The arrogance was gone. He was just a bankrupt man in a tuxedo he couldn't afford, staring at the ruins of his life. But I wasn't done. I turned to the head table. Julian was standing now. His face was gray. He looked like he was going to be sick. He was staring at Clarissa. Clarissa was frozen in her chair. Her face was a rictus of terror. She looked from me to Julian, then back to me. Julian, she stammered. Baby, don't listen to her. She is crazy. She is jealous. She always hated me. Did you know? Julian asked. His voice was quiet, but in the silent room, it sounded like a gunshot. "No!" Clarissa cried, grabbing his hand. He pulled it away as if she were made of fire. "No, I didn't know anything. This is all Mom and Dad. I am a victim too." "Really?" I asked. I pulled out my phone. I held it up to the microphone. "Let's go to the tape," I said. I pressed play. My voice filled the ballroom. Tinny but clear. "Julian doesn't know? He thinks Mom and Dad are paying for it?" Then Clarissa's voice. Unmistakable, dripping with arrogance. "Duh. He thinks Daddy is a genius investor. That is why we need to keep up appearances. If he knew we were actually broke, he would freak out. So, thank you for the condo money. It literally saved my life." The recording ended. Clarissa stopped breathing. She looked at Julian. Julian looked at her with an expression I will never forget. It wasn't anger. It was disgust. It was the look you give to something you find on the bottom of your shoe. "You knew," he whispered. "You knew they stole from your sister. You knew you were broke. You lied to me. Every single day." "Julian, please," Clarissa begged, tears finally streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "I love you. That is real. The love is real." "The love?" Julian laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You don't love me. You love my money. You love the safety I provide." He turned to his mother. Mrs. Sterling stood up. She was a small woman, but at that moment, she looked 10 feet tall. She walked over to the head table. She didn't look at Clarissa. She didn't look at my parents. She looked at her son. "Julian," she said, "we are leaving." "Yes," Julian said. He took off his wedding ring. He looked at it for a second, then dropped it onto the table. It made a small clink sound that echoed in the silence. He turned to Clarissa. "My lawyers will be in touch about the annulment. Fraud is grounds for immediate dissolution. You won't get a dime." "No!" Clarissa screamed. She grabbed at his arm, but he shook her off. "Julian, you can't leave me. Not like this. Not in front of everyone." "You did this," Julian said coldly. "You and your family." Then, Mrs. Sterling turned to the crowd. She picked up a glass of champagne from a nearby table. She held it up. "This wedding is a fraud," she announced, her voice ringing with authority. "This dinner is over. Everyone, please leave. Now." She smashed the glass on the floor. It was the signal. Pandemonium broke out. Guests started scrambling for the exits. People were pulling out their phones, recording the chaos. It was a riot of silk and tuxedos. My father was trying to shout, trying to regain control, but no one was listening. He was a king without a kingdom. I stood on the stage, watching it all. I felt light. The heavy weight that had been sitting on my chest since the surgery, since the betrayal, was gone. I looked at my sister. She was sobbing on the floor in her $30,000 dress, surrounded by the wreckage of her dreams. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with venom. "I hate you," she screamed. "You ruined my life. You are a monster." I leaned into the microphone one last time. "No, Clarissa," I said softly. "I just turned on the lights." I signaled to Vance. He nodded. We walked down the stairs. The crowd parted for us like the Red Sea. No one dared to touch me. No one dared to speak to me. I walked past my weeping mother. I walked past my broken father. I walked past my ruined sister. I walked out of the ballroom, my cane clicking rhythmically on the floor, leaving the Whitcomb family legacy in a pile of shattered glass and ugly truths. The disintegration of a high society wedding is not a slow process. It is an avalanche. One stone moves, in this case, the truth, and the entire mountainside comes crashing down, burying everyone standing at the bottom. After Mrs. Sterling smashed her champagne glass, the sound seemed to act as a starter pistol for the end of the world. I stood on the raised platform of the stage, my hand resting lightly on the podium, watching the chaos unfold with the detached clinical interest of a surgeon observing a procedure. The ballroom, which minutes ago had been a tableau of elegance, was now a pit of writhing, panicked humanity. The first casualty was the groom. Julian did not scream. He did not throw things. He simply ceased to be a fiancé and reverted to being a CEO. He buttoned his jacket, a gesture of armoring himself against the woman he had vowed to love only an hour ago. He walked over to where Clarissa was kneeling on the floor, her $30,000 dress pooling around her like spilled milk. "Julian!" she shrieked, reaching for his pant leg. Her mascara was running in black rivers down her cheeks. "Baby, please. It is a misunderstanding. I can explain." Julian took a step back, moving his leg out of her reach. He looked down at her not with love, and not even with hate. He looked at her with liability assessment. "Do not touch me," he said. His voice was low, but it cut through the room's noise. "Do not contact me. Do not come to the hotel. My legal team will be filing for an annulment first thing tomorrow morning on the grounds of fraud and material misrepresentation." "But we are married!" Clarissa wailed, a sound so shrill it made the crystal glasses on the nearby tables vibrate. "We said vows." "We signed a contract based on lies," Julian corrected her coldly. "You are not who you said you were. Your family is not who they said they were. You are a liability, Clarissa, and I am liquidating my position." He turned on his heel. The Sterlings formed a phalanx around him, his mother on one side, his father on the other, their security detail pushing ahead. They cut a path through the stunned guests. Marching toward the exit without looking back once, they left the Whitcombs behind like trash on the side of the road, as the heavy double doors swung shut behind them. The vacuum they left was instantly filled by the vultures, the guests. These were people who called themselves friends. These were the people who had eaten the lobster and drunk the wine. But now, the veneer of politeness had evaporated. Phones were out, not one or two, but hundreds. The flashes were blinding, a strobe light effect that illuminated the wreckage in harsh, white bursts. I saw a woman in a red dress, one of Clarissa's sorority sisters, holding her phone high, live streaming the breakdown. I could see the comments scrolling up her screen in a blur of emojis. Wedding fail, scammer, Whitcomb disaster. Clarissa saw the phones too. She scrambled to her feet, her veil torn and hanging off one ear. "Stop it!" she screamed at her friends. "Stop filming! Put it away! I will sue you! I will sue all of you!" "With what money?" someone shouted from the back of the room. Laughter rippled through the crowd. It was cruel, jagged laughter. The spell was broken. Clarissa was no longer the envy of the room. She was the entertainment. She spun around, wild-eyed, looking for a place to hide. But there was nowhere to go. The spotlight I had turned on was unforgiving. Then, the second casualty fell. My father, Robert. He had been standing near the head table, paralyzed by the sudden dismantling of his ego. But as the laughter grew, as the realization of his public ruin settled in, his body gave out. I saw his face turn a deep, alarming shade of crimson. He clutched his left arm, his mouth opened, but no sound came out. He swayed like a felled tree and crashed into the table, sending plates and silverware clattering to the floor before he hit the carpet with a heavy thud. "Robert!" my mother screamed. She scrambled over to him, falling to her knees. "He is having a heart attack. Somebody help! Call 911!" A hush fell over the immediate area, but the filming did not stop. If anything, the phones moved closer. This was the plot twist the internet craved. I watched from the stage. I felt a strange flutter in my own chest, my new valve working perfectly, pumping oxygenated blood to my brain. I wondered if my father's heart was as strong as the one I had just bought with my pain. "I have already called the paramedics," Harrison Vance said, stepping up beside me. "And the police." As if on cue, the wail of sirens began to bleed into the room from the street below. Blue and red lights washed over the windows, mixing with the gold of the chandeliers. The hotel security, finally reacting, swung the doors open. But it wasn't just paramedics who entered. 2 uniformed Chicago police officers walked in. looking stern and unamused by the spectacle. Vance had timed this perfectly. They weren't there to drag anyone away in handcuffs yet. That requires warrants and time. But they were there to take statements. They were there to make it official. The paramedics rushed to my father. Surrounding him with equipment, they were checking his vitals, shouting commands. BP is 200 over 110. We have a hypertensive crisis. Get the stretcher. They loaded my father onto the gurney. He was conscious, blinking up at the ceiling, tears streaming into his ears. He looked defeated. He looked small. The police officers approached the head table. One of them pulled out a notepad and began speaking to my mother, who was trying to climb into the ambulance stretcher with my father. "Ma'am, we need to ask you a few questions regarding a report of forgery and grand larceny filed by an Arlene Whitcomb," the officer said. "Not now," my mother shrieked, pushing the officer's hand away. "My husband is dying. Can't you see he is dying?" "We will meet you at the hospital, ma'am," the officer said, stepping back but not retreating. "But do not leave the city. We have your information." The paramedics wheeled my father out. The crowd parted again. But this time, there was no applause, just whispers, just judgment. I decided it was time to descend. I gripped my cane and walked down the stairs, Vance right beside me, acting as my shield. We moved through the crowd. People stared at me. Some looked terrified. Some looked impressed. Most just looked like they didn't want to be in the line of fire. I stopped near the center of the room. My mother was standing there, watching the ambulance doors close down the hallway. She turned slowly. Her eyes found me. If looks could kill, I would have needed a second heart transplant. She marched toward me. Her hair was disheveled, her expensive makeup settling into the deep lines of her face. She looked like a banshee. "You," she hissed. She raised a hand as if to slap me. Vance stepped forward, intercepting her wrist in midair. "I would not do that. Elaine, that is assault, and there are 2 police officers standing 10 feet away." My mother yanked her hand back. Trembling with rage, she ignored Vance and bored her eyes into mine. "Are you happy?" she screamed. Spittle flew from her mouth. "Are you happy now? You killed your father. You destroyed your sister. You are a monster, a devil." "I am alive, Mom," I said calmly. "You are ungrateful," she shrieked. "We gave you life. We raised you. And this is how you repay us? Over money? Over a stupid apartment? You have destroyed this family." "I didn't destroy the family, Mom," I said. "I just exposed it." "You are heartless," she spat. "You are cold. Arlene, I don't know where you came from. You are no daughter of mine." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had birthed me, who had supposedly loved me, but who had chosen to sacrifice me on the altar of her own vanity. "You are right," I said. "I am not your daughter anymore. I am your creditor." I took a step closer to her, leaning on my cane so I could look her dead in the eye. "You sold me, Mom," I said. My voice was low, devoid of emotion. "You put a price tag on my life while I was dying. $425,000. That was what I was worth to you. Less than a catering bill. Less than a flower budget." She opened her mouth to argue, to spin another lie, but I cut her off. "I am just reclaiming my value," I said. "You made a transaction. Now you are dealing with the receipt." I turned away from her. I didn't wait for her response. There was nothing left to say. "Let's go. Vance," I said. We walked toward the main exit. Clarissa was still on the floor, surrounded by a ring of people who were pretending to comfort her while actually mining her misery for content. She looked up as I passed. Her face was swollen, her eyes red and puffy. "Arlene," she choked out. "Help me, please. Everyone is leaving. They are canceling the honeymoon. They are canceling everything." I paused for a brief second. I looked down at her. "You have a wedding dress," I said. "Sell it. It is worth $30,000. That should cover your rent for a few months." I kept walking. We stepped out of the hotel and into the cool night air of Chicago. The wind was brisk. coming off the lake, carrying the scent of rain. It felt clean. It felt real. Behind me, inside the hotel, the rot was being consumed by its own consequences. But out here, the city was just continuing on. Taxis honked. Pedestrians laughed. The L train rumbled overhead. "Are you okay?" Vance asked, as we waited for his car to pull up. I searched for the word. I expected to feel sad. I expected to feel guilty. But I felt neither. "I feel light," I said. My phone buzzed in my clutch. I pulled it out. It was a notification from Twitter. The hashtag Whitcomb fraud was trending in Chicago. I clicked on it. There were videos of the speech, videos of my father collapsing. And then, there were the brands. Lux Beauty Co. tweeted, "In light of recent events regarding Clarissa Whitcomb, we have immediately terminated our partnership. We do not condone fraud or illegal activity." Sunshine Swimwear tweeted, "We have severed all ties with our brand ambassador, Clarissa Whitcomb. Our hearts go out to the victims of this deception. The house of cards wasn't just falling, it was being incinerated. Clarissa's career. Her only source of income outside of my parents' theft was gone in less than an hour. She was unemployable. She was a pariah." "The police will want a formal statement tomorrow," Vance said as his car arrived. "And we have to serve the eviction papers." "Serve them at the hospital," I said, getting into the back seat. "My father will be there for a few days. They can't claim they didn't receive them." "Ruthless," Vance murmured, but there was respect in his tone. "Necessary," I replied. We drove away from the Palmer house. I watched the golden awning recede in the rearview mirror. It looked like a tomb. I had the driver drop me off at my rental apartment in River North. I walked into the quiet, beige room. It was empty. It was impersonal, but it was mine. I took off the navy blue dress. I hung it up carefully. It was my battle armor, and it had served me well. I went to the bathroom and washed my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired. There were dark circles under my eyes. My skin was pale, but my eyes were clear. The prey was gone. The victim was gone. I touched the scar on my chest. It was pink and jagged, a reminder that I had been broken open and put back together. I went to bed. For 7 weeks, I had slept fitfully, haunted by nightmares of suffocating, of drowning, of waking up in a room where no one could hear me scream. But tonight, as I pulled the duvet up to my chin, there were no nightmares. The silence was not lonely. It was peaceful. I closed my eyes. I listened to the steady, strong rhythm of my heart. Thump, 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 thump. It was the sound of a debt paid in full. I fell asleep instantly, and I slept the sleep of the just. 6 months have passed since the night the glass shattered at the Palmer house. My chest has healed. The angry red scar that once looked like a zipper running down my sternum has faded to a pale, thin line. It is a part of me now. A map of where I have been and what I survived. My new heart beats with a quiet, rhythmic strength. It does not flutter with anxiety when my phone rings. It does not race with the fear of imminent financial ruin. It just beats, steady and sure, fueling a life that finally belongs entirely to me. The fallout from the wedding was not an explosion that ended quickly. It was a slow, grinding erosion that stripped the Whitcomb family down to the bedrock of their reality. My parents are no longer the lords of the manor in Lake Forest. The eviction process, expedited by the criminal charges, was brutal and efficient. They had 24 hours to vacate, but because I am not completely heartless, I gave them 3 days. I did not go to watch them pack. I did not want the satisfaction of seeing my mother wrap her crystal glasses in newspaper, or seeing my father drag his golf clubs to a U-Haul truck. I sent movers to do it. They live in Waukegan now, in a 2-bedroom apartment on the 2nd floor of a complex that smells perpetually of boiled cabbage and stale cigarettes. It is a far cry from the manicured lawns and solariums of their past. They are living on their combined Social Security checks and a very small pension my father has left. There are no more country club dinners. There are no more imported wines. Their social circle evaporated the moment the eviction notice was made public. The Sterlings, and the rest of Chicago high society, treated them like they were contagious. They tried to contact me in the first few weeks. My mother sent long, rambling emails oscillating between begging for money and damning me to hell. My father left voicemails threatening to sue me for defamation, then weeping and asking for a loan. I did not respond. I changed my phone number. I set up a filter on my email account that automatically directs anything from their addresses into a trash folder that deletes itself every 24 hours. I do not read them. I do not listen to them. Silence is the heaviest door you can close on someone, and I have locked it tight. As for the house in Lake Forest, I sold it. The market was hot, and despite the scandal attached to the family name, the property itself was prime real estate. It sold for $1.2 million. The irony is delicious. After paying off the remaining mortgage I held through Veritas Holdings and covering the closing costs, I walked away with over $600,000. I recouped the $425,000 they stole from me, plus interest, plus pain and suffering. I did not buy a yacht. I did not buy a sports car. I took the surplus, the profit made from the destruction of their facade, and I invested it in a seed fund for affordable housing development in the south side of Chicago. I used their monument to vanity to build actual shelter for people who actually need it. Clarissa's fall was perhaps the most public, and therefore, the most painful. Julian was as good as his word. He filed for an annulment based on fraud, and because the marriage was never consummated, he left the hotel before they even spent the night together. The judge granted it in record time. But Julian did not stop there. He sued Clarissa for the return of the engagement ring, which she had tried to pawn the morning after the wedding, and for the costs of the reception. She lost everything. The lawsuits drained whatever small savings she had managed to squirrel away. The brand deals are gone. Her Instagram account, once a shrine to her golden life, is now deactivated. The comments section had become a war zone she could not survive. Last I heard, through a mutual acquaintance I haven't cut off, Clarissa is working as a server at a chain restaurant near O'Hare Airport. She wears a uniform with a name tag. She serves burgers and fries to travelers who have no idea she almost married into one of the wealthiest families in the Midwest. She has to stand on her feet for 8 hours a day. She has to smile at rude customers. She has to work for her money. I suppose that is the best education she could ever receive. Legally, my parents avoided prison, but just barely. They were charged with forgery and fraud. The evidence I provided was irrefutable. The prosecutor wanted to make an example of them. But when it came time for the sentencing hearing, I submitted a letter to the judge. I did not ask for forgiveness. I asked for leniency. I wrote that sending 2 elderly people to prison would cost the taxpayers money and give them a platform to play the victim. I argued that stripping them of their status and forcing them to live with the consequences of their actions in the real world was a far harsher punishment. The judge agreed. He gave them 5 years of probation and 2,000 hours of community service. My father, who used to look down on manual labor, now spends his weekends picking up trash along the highway in an orange vest. My mother works in a soup kitchen, serving the very people she used to mock. They have felony records. They can never vote again. They can never hold positions of trust. They are marked. That was my final act of mercy. I let them keep their freedom so they could fully experience their irrelevance. As for me, life has expanded. I returned to Helix Horizon Group 2 months after the wedding. The partners had heard about the incident. It was impossible to miss the gossip. But instead of judging me, they respected the strength it took to handle it. I was promoted to Senior Director of Urban Planning. I am leading the design on the new Riverwalk project. I work hard, but I no longer work 16 hours a day to fill a void. I bought a new house. It is not a penthouse in the Loop, and it is not a mansion in the suburbs. It is a historic brownstone in Lincoln Park. It has high ceilings, a garden in the back where I grow herbs, and a library with a fireplace. The deed has exactly one name on it: Arlene Whitcomb. There are no hidden clauses. There are no secret owners. It is mine, every brick, every beam, every window. A few weeks ago, I ran into Julian. It was a Tuesday morning. I was grabbing an espresso at a coffee shop near my office. I turned around, and there he was, standing in line. He looked different, lighter. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was in jeans and a sweater. "Arlene," he said. He didn't look angry. "Hello, Julian," I said. We stepped out onto the sidewalk to talk. The winter wind was blowing, but the sun was shining. "I never got to thank you," he said quietly. "You don't have to thank me," I replied. "I ruined your wedding." "You saved me from a life of lies," he said. He looked me in the eye, and I saw genuine gratitude there. "If you hadn't done what you did, I would have married a stranger. I would have tied my family's future to a fraud. It hurt like hell at the time, but you cut out the cancer before it could spread. I am sorry you had to be collateral damage," I said. "I am recovering." He smiled. It was a real smile. "I am seeing someone new. She is a librarian. She hates social media. It is nice. I am happy for you. Julian, take care of yourself. Arlene," he said. He reached out and squeezed my hand, briefly. "You are a terrifying woman, but you are the most honest person I've ever met." He walked away. Blending into the crowd, I watched him go, feeling a sense of closure click into place like a final puzzle piece. I walked home to my brownstone. Now, I am sitting in my living room. The fire is crackling in the hearth. I have a cup of Earl Grey tea in my hand. Through the bay window, I can see the lights of Chicago twinkling in the twilight. The city is vast and noisy, full of millions of people fighting their own battles. I am alone in this house. There is no husband, no children, no parents calling to check in. Some might call it lonely, but as I take a sip of tea and feel the warmth spread through my chest, I realize it is not loneliness, it is peace. I learned a hard lesson this year. I learned that biology is not a suicide pact. I learned that family is not a magic word that grants immunity for abuse, theft, and betrayal. I learned that you cannot save people who are determined to drown you to stay afloat. I lost a father. I lost a mother. I lost a sister. I looked at the empty space around me. It is clean. It is quiet. It is safe. I put the teacup down on the table. I lost a toxic family. But I found myself. I found my voice. I found my spine. And most importantly, I found the truth. I leaned back in the chair and watched the smoke rise from the chimney, disappearing into the night sky. I am Arlene Whitcomb. I am the owner of this house. I am the owner of my life. And that is a price I was willing to pay. Thank you so much for listening to this story of betrayal and justice. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from your car, your kitchen, or maybe while taking a walk? Please leave a comment below with your location and let me know what you would have done if you were in Arlene's shoes. If you enjoyed seeing the greedy get what they deserve, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Blue Payback, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people who need to hear it. Stay safe, and remember, the truth always wins.